At 4 in the morning, a freight broker in Chicago raises the rate on the same load for the third time before sunrise. He's not doing it because diesel got more expensive overnight. He's doing it because 3 drivers in a row read the destination, did the math in about 2 seconds, and kept scrolling. That's happening right now in 2026 to a specific short list of American cities. Freight that pays hundreds of dollars over market is sitting on the board untouched, because to the people who actually turn the wheel, the money stopped being worth it. This isn't a boycott. Nobody organized it. It's 10 cities losing the same quiet argument, one refused load at a time. And number 1 is a city that this year earned an official, data-backed title that no city wants. A title drivers saw coming a decade ago. Here's the idea that runs through all 10. Every load has a price, the number on the board. And every load has a cost. The tolls, the hours, the theft, the lawsuit, the thing that doesn't show up in the rate until it's too late. For most of these cities, in 2026, that second number finally got bigger than the first. Let's count them down. We start where the enemy isn't a person. It's the sky and the concrete. Houston puts 2 separate interchanges in the nation's top 10 worst freight bottlenecks. The tangle where I-45 meets I-69, and the one where I-10 crosses it. And the researchers who track this aren't guessing. They pull GPS data straight off the trucks themselves, and their 2026 verdict is that rush hour truck speeds at the worst choke points have dropped to under 30 miles an hour. But congestion is just the appetizer. Houston is where the weather actively hunts freight. Summer heat sits over the metro like a lid, cooking tires on pavement that's pushing 140 degrees. And then there's the water. This is a city that has drowned under a named storm more than once in the last decade, closing the freeways for days and turning loaded trailers into boats. Do the arithmetic a Houston-bound driver runs. Federal rules give you a 14-hour window, and the clock never stops once it starts. Not for gridlock, not for a wall of water on I-10. Burn 3 hours creeping through the Houston bottleneck, and that's 3 hours you don't get paid for and can't get back, because a driver is paid for moving miles, not for sitting in them. Nationwide, that lost time now adds up to the equivalent of hundreds of thousands of drivers sitting idle for a full year, and Houston is one of the biggest single drains on the map. Add the petrochemical corridor, where every third trailer is hauling something flammable, and the routing gets its own layer of restriction, and Houston stops being a payday and starts being a gamble against the barometer. Veterans don't refuse Houston outright. They refuse Houston in August, and they refuse it when the radar's lit up. Weather is the softest villain on this list. It only gets harder from here, because the next city didn't get unlucky with a storm, it lost an entire bridge. On March 26, 2024, a container ship lost power and took down the Francis Scott Key Bridge in the middle of the night, killing 6 road workers and dropping 1.5 miles of steel into the Patapsco River. 2 years on, that single event is still bleeding money out of every hazmat driver who works the East Coast. And the bridge won't be back until 2028 at the earliest, with some estimates now sliding toward 2030. Here's why it lands on this list. The Key Bridge carried nearly 5,000 trucks a day and something like $28 billion in goods a year. And crucially, it was the harbor crossing that hazardous materials trucks were allowed to use, because they're banned from Baltimore's 2 harbor tunnels, the Fort McHenry and the Baltimore Harbor. Take out the bridge and the tanker of anything flammable suddenly has exactly one legal option, a 30 to 35 mile detour clear around the city on the Beltway, every trip. And the tunnels that everyone else got funneled into have their own trap, low ceilings that a tall trailer can't clear, and 16,000 extra vehicles a day now crammed into them. So run the math a fuel hauler runs now. A crossing that used to take 5 minutes on the bridge is a 35-mile loop times every single hazmat run times today's diesel. Either the load pays a premium to cover it, or the load doesn't move. And here's the ugly human footnote. Reporters staking out the tunnels have watched drivers peel the hazmat placards right off their trailers to sneak through illegally and skip the detour, gambling a catastrophe in an underwater tunnel against a few gallons of fuel. That's what a broken bridge does to the arithmetic. It makes cheating look rational. Baltimore is a wound that won't close for years. Now leave the coast and head for the fastest growing traffic jam in America. Nashville is on this list for a reason that sounds almost like good news. Too many people want to be here. here. The interchange where I-24 and I-40 tangle up on the east side of downtown climbed into the nation's top 10 freight bottlenecks in 2026, a newcomer to a list usually hogged by the old giants. Music City has been one of the fastest growing metros in the country, and the freight demand exploded to feed it, but the roads underneath were built for a smaller town that no longer exists. Layer on the bachelorette weekends, the stadium traffic, the endless downtown construction, and you get a city where the congestion isn't a rush hour event, it's the whole day. The math here is the cruelest kind, because it's invisible until it ruins your afternoon. There's no theft ring, no toll gantry, nothing you can point at. There's just a delivery window that looked generous on paper and evaporates in a crawl through a city that grew faster than its asphalt. And a blown appointment in Nashville doesn't just cost you that load, it can cascade into a missed reload and a wasted day. Growth is the villain, and growth doesn't send you a warning. That's 3 cities where the road itself is the problem. The next 4 are where it stops being an accident and someone starts actively coming for your freight. Here's a plot twist that caught a lot of drivers off guard in 2025. The theft crews moved. For years, the story was Los Angeles. Then, as enforcement tightened around the ports, the organized groups did what any business does. They relocated to where it was easier. And the numbers tell the story cold. In 2025, while cargo theft in Los Angeles County actually fell around 11%, Kern County, that's Bakersfield, spiked 82%. San Joaquin County, up around Stockton, jumped 44%. The crews didn't stop stealing, they commuted. And what they're grabbing tells you exactly why the valley works for them. This is farm country. Almonds, pistachios, tree nuts by the trailer load, moving out of the orchards along Highway 99. A trailer of almonds has no serial numbers, no way to trace it, and there's often a buyer lined up before it even leaves the packing house. So a driver hauling a clean, boring agricultural load through a region that used to be the safe part of the state is now sitting on a target and doesn't know it, because the reputation hasn't caught up to the reality yet. That gap between where drivers think the danger is and where it actually moved is exactly what the crews are exploiting. The arithmetic is brutal in its simplicity. Park overnight at the wrong stop on the 99 with a load of nuts, and there's roughly 0 chance you ever see it again once it rolls off in somebody else's truck. And unlike electronics, there's no serial number to flag, no way for a recovery team to trace it, no insurance-friendly paper trail. It's gone, the way cash is gone. Fuel there if you must. Sleep somewhere with a fence and a camera, and back your doors up against something solid so the seal can't be cut. The valley isn't the safe middle of California anymore. It's the fastest climbing theft frontier in the country, and the reputation is still a year behind the reality. And if the crews out there are opportunists with bolt cutters, the next city runs its theft like a corporation. Memphis sits on top of the American supply chain, 5 interstates, the Mississippi River, the busiest cargo airport on the continent, and rail yards running in every direction. All of that freight funneling through one metro created a lot of jobs. It also created some of the most practiced cargo theft crews in the country. The rail data alone is staggering. When railroad police testified to a Senate subcommittee in 2025, the picture they painted was of organized crews sabotaging trains to rob them, literally cutting the air brake hoses to force a stopped train, then stripping the containers before anyone can respond. Tennessee accounted for roughly 13% of all rail cargo theft in the country that year, one of the highest shares of any state, and railroads reported catching the same repeat offenders over and over. One individual arrested 17 times. And on the road side, one corridor gets whispered about at every fuel counter between Little Rock and Nashville, the truck stop strip along Lamar Avenue, where drivers describe crews following high-value loads out of the warehouse districts and cutting the trailer open while the driver sleeps 10 feet away in the bunk. Now here's the arithmetic closing the loop from the very start of this video. Remember that Chicago broker raising his rate? The same thing happens with Memphis. Brokers have learned that the words Memphis and overnight in the same load posting will leave that load sitting on the board for hours. So the rate creeps up, the market pricing in the theft in real time, and it still sits. Some carriers now flatly ban their drivers from parking a loaded trailer inside the metro overnight, period. The premium is real, it's just not enough. That's the market keeping score, out loud, every morning. Memphis crews cut the lock. The next city never has to. In Dallas, they figured out how to steal your load without ever touching a lock, a fence, or a trailer. They steal your company instead. It's called strategic theft or fictitious pickup, and in 2026, it evolved into something genuinely chilling. The old version was fake paperwork. A crew clones a real carrier's federal motor carrier number and insurance certificate, shows up at a warehouse looking legitimate, and a forklift driver loads them in broad daylight. But the newest tactic the industry is tracking is worse. Criminal networks are literally buying real established trucking companies, ones with clean records and years of good load history, and using that spotless reputation to book high-value freight straight off the broker board. By the time anyone realizes the load's not arriving, it's been cross-docked twice and the trail is cold. Nationally, these deception schemes jumped more than 30% year over year, and now drive a chunk of the roughly 7 cargo thefts recorded every single day in America. The reason honest drivers hate Dallas more than almost anywhere else isn't the loss, it's the suspicion. When a load vanishes into a fraudulent pickup, the first people investigators lean on are the real drivers who touched that dock. Owner-operators now report getting photographed and fingerprinted and grilled at shipping offices like suspects, because the thieves learn to dress, talk, and paper themselves exactly like the legitimate guy standing next to them. And this is the theft that guts small carriers fastest. A fictitious pickup can swallow a load worth $250,000 in a single afternoon. And for a one-truck operation, one hit like that is the whole business. The math there isn't about tolls or hours. It's that in Dallas, being an honest trucker with a clean authority has itself become a thing worth stealing, and a thing that gets you interrogated. When the criminals wear your identity, the cost lands on your name. That's the last of the thieves. From here up, the villain gets bigger and it stops being illegal. Los Angeles is still the single most stolen from place in America. California alone accounts for close to 4 in 10 cargo theft incidents in the country. But that's not the main reason owner-operators are quietly crossing it off. The theft you can defend against with a camera and a secure yard. What you can't defend against is the squeeze coming from the other direction, the system itself. The ports of LA and Long Beach are the richest container freight in the nation, but pulling that freight, the short drayage runs from the docks, comes wrapped in the strictest clean truck rules in the country. An owner-operator with a paid-off older rig, a truck with hundreds of thousands of good miles left in it, can find himself locked out of the best-paying port work unless he takes on a payment for a newer truck that can cost more than a house. Then stack the legal climate on top. Los Angeles was named the nation's #1 judicial hellhole in the 2025 to 2026 tort reform rankings. Home this year to an eye-popping billion-dollar verdict. For a trucking company, that's not abstract. One bad afternoon on an LA freeway in front of the wrong jury can end a family business. So the arithmetic in LA is a vice. On one side, the highest value freight in America. On the other, the cost of a compliant truck, the tail risk of a nuclear verdict, and a theft rate that never really lets up. Thousands of small operators looked at that squeeze, looked at the map, and simply stopped coming. They run Phoenix and Vegas and let somebody else fight for the port money. The freight capital of America is bleeding the very drivers it runs on, and if LA's courtroom risk is a side effect, the next city makes the courtroom the entire threat. Ask a trucking company owner which city genuinely scares him, and the answer might not involve a single stolen box. It might be a courthouse in Philadelphia. For years, the Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas was ranked the worst judicial hellhole in America, a magnet for the kind of jury awards the industry calls nuclear verdicts, judgments against trucking companies that blow past $10 million. Plaintiff attorneys know it, which is why injury hotline billboards line the interstates into the city, and why lawsuits get filed in Philadelphia even when the wreck happened hundreds of miles away. In one 2025 case, plaintiffs from a multi-vehicle crash out in Westmoreland County, nearly 300 miles from Philly, tried to drag the case into the city anyway, purely for the friendlier jury pool. Now the honest part, because it matters. Philadelphia's giant verdicts actually dropped in 2025, and the court slid down the rankings, but read why before you relax. It wasn't reform, and it wasn't the courts getting fairer. It's that corporate defendants, trucking companies included, are now so afraid of the venue that they settle almost any case rather than risk being the next headline. Think about what that means. The reputation is so toxic that companies pay to make cases go away before a jury is ever seated. The verdicts went down because the fear went up. That's the arithmetic of Philadelphia, and it's the strangest on this list because the cost doesn't hit on the road, it hits 2 years later in a filing you never see. Some carriers quietly refuse Metro Philadelphia freight. Others take it, but only with their newest trucks and their cleanest drivers, because one fender bender on the Schuylkill Expressway in front of the wrong jury could erase a company that survived everything else. The most expensive collision in Philadelphia is the one that happens in a courtroom. Before the final two, if you've made it this far, you're clearly one of us. So do the free thing and subscribe. This channel runs the road, the freight, and the blue-collar math every week. Now, the runner-up put a literal price tag on every reason drivers ever hated it. For as long as anyone can remember, a driver could say one line at any fuel island in America and get a nod of pure respect. I don't do the city. New York was always the hardest freight in the country. In 2025 and 2026, the city took every reason drivers hated it and stamped a dollar amount on each one. Start with congestion pricing, which, after the lawsuits, after a federal attempt to kill it, after a judge upheld it in March of 2026, is now permanent. Bring a big multi-unit truck into Manhattan below 60th Street during the day, and you pay $21.60. And here's the part that guts a delivery route. Unlike a car, which pays once a day, a truck is charged per entry with no daily cap. 4 stops in the zone means 4 separate charges. On a designated gridlock alert day, a surcharge pushes that single entry toward $27. That's before you've touched a bridge, cross into the city on a major crossing in a 5-axle rig, and the toll alone can run past $100 before the workday even begins. Then comes parking, which is to say there isn't any. Legal truck parking in the 5 boroughs is effectively zero, so drivers double park to unload and collect tickets that big fleets literally budget for as a line item, the way you'd budget for fuel. Tickets that can run well into the hundreds, day after day, until the cost of simply being in the city rivals the cost of the fuel to get there. And miss one turn off your route and a GPS built for cars can feed a 70-foot rig onto a parkway laid out in the 1930s, where a low stone bridge waits to peel the roof off a trailer like a can opener. It happens to somebody every year. The video always goes viral, and the driver eats the trailer, the freight, and the bridge repair all at once. So the arithmetic in New York is just addition that never stops. Toll, plus per entry, plus the ticket, plus the hour lost circling for a curb. Freight into the city pays some of the highest rates in America, and the tiny crew of specialists who know every dock and every bridge height earn every cent. Everyone else looks at that number, does the subtraction, and keeps scrolling. And yet, the city drivers refuse, hardest of all, isn't the one that prices you out. It's the one that, in 2026, made it official. In February of 2026, for the first time in the history of the ranking, Chicago was crowned the single worst freight bottleneck in the entire United States. The interchange of I-294 and I-290 finally overtaking the New Jersey choke point that had held the top spot for 7 straight years. The drivers weren't surprised. They've been saying it for a decade, but an official GPS-verified title is just the first reason Chicago sits at number 1. Because no other city on this list stacks every problem into one place the way Chicago does. Start with the freight itself. Chicago is the rail capital of North America. Roughly a quarter of the continent's freight trains pass through it, and in the last few years, that made it a hunting ground. Illinois accounted for about 26% of all rail cargo theft in the country in 2024, more than any other state. And these aren't smash and grabs. Railroad police told the Senate the crews are cutting air brake hoses to stop trains in motion, showing up armed, tied to transnational organized crime. Loaded trailers left in the unsecured lots of the industrial suburbs, Bedford Park, Joliet, get opened one after another while drivers lay over between loads. Now stack the rest on top. The tolls threaded across the Illinois system. The winter, which can shut the Dan Ryan and freeze a schedule solid. And a Cook County jury pool that plaintiff attorneys love nearly as much as the ones we just left in Philadelphia. That's the whole point of Chicago at number 1. I'll be straight with you. Other cities beat it on any single metric. Los Angeles loses more dollars to theft. New York charges more in tolls. But Chicago is the only city in America that hands you the worst gridlock, elite-level rail theft, brutal tolls, a rough courtroom, and a winter that can bury all of it in one metro you can't route around because the whole national map runs through it. So the driver's rule for Chicago has become simple and absolute. Never drop a loaded trailer anywhere in the metro zero and walk away from it. Stay with the freight or shut down across the line in Indiana or Wisconsin, anywhere but here. The math doesn't close in Chicago. The freight still has to move through it, so the rate on that 4 a.m. broker's board keeps climbing. The drivers just refuse to let it sit there, and the higher that number ticks, the louder the scoreboard reads. Run back through all 10 and the same thing is true every time. There was no meeting, no union vote, no boycott. There were just millions of drivers, each one at a fuel counter at 2 in the morning, weighing the price on the board against the cost they can't see on it, and quietly deciding the load wasn't worth the trouble. That's not fear, and it's not laziness. It's judgment, the kind you only earn 1 mile at a time. And the market is listening, because every refused load nudges the rate to these cities a little higher, until either the pay finally matches the pain, or the cities fix the theft and the tolls and the courts and win their freight back cheap. The drivers are just keeping score. And the score gets posted on the load board every single morning for anyone who cares to read it. So tell me in the comments, what city did I leave off? The one you let ring when the broker calls. The load board never lies, and right now it's telling 10 American cities exactly what their freight is really worth. Keep the shiny side up, lock your trailer, and we'll see you down the road.